How healthy are the Buffalo Bills? What's the status of Matt MIlano, the new additions in the draft class? We're talking to Dr. Kyle Trimble today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. I'm joined today by Dr. Kyle Trimble. He's a doctor of physical therapy. He runs bangedupbills.com. You can follow him on X at bangedupbills. And it just felt like it was time for a conversation about the health of the Bills. And really the genesis of doing this is some concerns about Matt MIlano. And the Bills investing in some linebacker depth recently, and it raises some concerns about Matt MIlano. So we're going to get into that, the new additions, the draft picks, an overall update on the health of the Bills. Dr. Kyle Trimble, thanks for being here. I hope your offseason has been going well, and I'm excited to get back into it with you.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. It's been very busy, but I'm ready to talk about Bills football and everything comes along with it.
All right. Well, give us all the good news, please. Well, no, we really just want you to be honest. Let's do it. Let's talk about Matt MIlano. Injury last year, week 5 in London. You know, he misses the rest of the season. There was some maybe hope that he could come back. Didn't come back. And now we're getting into the offseason where the expectation was for him to have a regular offseason. I don't know if that has or hasn't happened, but there's at least a level of panic right now out there. What do we need to know about Matt MIlano?
So quick recap. In London, he broke his tibial plateau when he crashed into the pocket. I think it was early second quarter. He had to get carted off, and he's done for the season. At the time, I originally thought that there were a few cases that there was a small chance that he could have returned, and that was it was possible because we saw him on the sidelines and he was starting to make some progress with things. But realistically, the tibial plateau fractures take a lot longer than 3 months. But there were some isolated cases who they did come back quicker. You know, we're seeing him now on social media. The Bills are purposeful in what they do with social media, and they put him in some of those pictures of them working out during OTAs, and he's been using the ropes. He's been doing different lunge activities. He's been working out, and some of the concerns recently from Brandon Beane were saying he's hoping he's ready by training camp, maybe a little bit after. Brandon Beane's also said that he's come out and said he was farther along than Trey White when they were both rehabbing together before Trey was released. And so we're just seeing some variations in the mention too, where they're signing some linebackers for depth and whatnot. So obviously the concern is, oh my God, is Matt MIlano going to be ready for camp? As of right now, from what I'm seeing and from the little bit that I do hear, it sounds like he's still on track there. We know that the Bills are fairly conservative with injuries in general. We do know that they like to slow play things. We've seen that plenty of times with Von Miller, with Travis White, even with Zach Moss, even when he's come off his tightrope surgery. And there's other cases along with that too there. So they're not trying to get these guys back out there to be 100% by the time, day one of training camp happens there. So I think that's why they gave a little bit of that leeway with Matt MIlano. Looking at some of the pictures, he did have a black sleeve on his right leg. He did have some obvious muscle atrophy, which is pretty common after the lower extremity injuries. We saw that with Trey White. We saw Von Miller, other guys, anytime they deal with that stuff. The issue is that he was unable to weight bear for 8 months. There are interventions, techniques, things they can do to help keep that muscle from getting weaker, but still sometimes you seem to be putting weight through the leg and getting the leg stronger and just working it through. So to see that muscle atrophy isn't a surprise or even a major concern, but this was a pretty big injury. So the concern obviously is if he's going to be ready. I see nothing that says that he's not going to. They're going to certainly take things along slowly. Some things that could set him back include if there's any hardware irritation, if he has a full range of motion of the knee, if he just gets this thing more irritated and trying to push it there. So I think that's why they're going to take a slow approach and not have him try to ramp up too quickly there. And there's no real need to. There's 5 months away from football, and they want to make sure that when he steps back in the field, he's as close to 100% as he's going to be, or at least was as he was prior to. Are we going to get the 2022 All-Pro Matt MIlano right off in week 1? No. I mean, I don't believe that's going to be the case there. He might have to round in the form, knock off some of the rust and whatnot, just coming back from a severe injury like that. But we know that bone's going to be more reliably healing than a ligament or a tendon or anything else like that there. So I think it's going to take time. I think once we get some video on him running around, we'll get a better idea where he's at with things. That could change my opinion on things. But right now, we know that tibial plateau fractures do take some time to come back from. It's not just the bone healing up. The bone needs to regain strength in terms of weight bearing and accepting the weight through all the activities it has to do and the muscles that attach to it and build that back up there. So it's just time consuming process. We've seen other instances where they come back and they've done well. I'd say the best case scenario is JJ Watt a few years ago. He had tibial plateau fracture and it came back in that All-Pro season next year. I know that JJ Watt is a freak of nature, but we have seen good outcomes after a tibial plateau fracture. The other one unknown we don't have is if this fracture was more severe than what anticipated. From what I understood was he had either a type 1, type 2 fracture where there's a fracture in the tibia and then there is a depression in the bone from where the compression was at there, the direct hit. If he had a type 4, type 5, type 6 Scatcher classification, I hope I pronounced that right, then there's more fractures in the bone, which could mean that there's more of a complicated recovery, but nothing I've seen or heard suggests that, and he should continue to progress in the right direction.
I'm sure at rookie minicamp this coming week, I'd expect Sean McDermott to take a question or two about MIlano. So I'm not sure we're going to get more, but I felt like Beane kind of opened this up a little bit with his most recent press availability, or was it at some type of season ticket holders event or something where it was like, all right, well, he's coming along, we're going to take it slow, where the last messaging was, well, we expect a normal offseason. So stay tuned, but it doesn't sound like there's anything to panic about quite yet. Let's talk about Spencer Brown. And if I'm not mistaken, was it Dion Dawkins in one of his media availabilities at some point this offseason let it out that their offensive line retreat didn't happen because Spencer Brown had a surgery. And so now we know that he had a surgery this offseason, obviously a long-standing history of some back stuff, if I'm not mistaken, an elbow. What can you tell us about that?
We don't have a whole lot other than what Dion said. I did poke around trying to find some stuff, and Dion said he had the surgery, but we don't know where the surgery was at, whether it was a shoulder, knee, or it was back again. We know he did have I believe the left shoulder taped up pretty good during the season. He did injure his knee against the Giants. He got pushed over, and I think that's when Josh Allen came to his defense and whatnot. That's when Josh Allen hurt his shoulder. And then we also know the previous issue with the back there. Considering we know that the surgery happened probably sometime in February, and then we saw Spencer Brown working out and doing the leg press and everything like that, leads me to believe that he probably didn't have surgery to his back, because we saw that he was a pretty slow. It wasn't a slow healer, but they were conservative with that during training camp when he had a surgery back a few years ago for the discectomy. It's possible he could have had a knee scope out, clean out, whatnot, but he was putting up quite a lot of weight on the leg press. Which leads me to believe that he probably had the shoulder. I can't say I saw him doing anything heavy duty with the lifting up overhead, but the shoulders could probably be more reliable if he just needs it cleaned out versus a knee. And, God forbid if it was a back, but we don't know. He probably won't tell us, but there's nothing to be concerned about unless something pops up from a media report.
Terrel Bernard missed the Kansas City game in the playoffs with the ankle, and we've seen through the embedded video him working out with Jalen Petrie in Texas. It seems that he's good to go. Anything we need to be mindful of as it relates to Terrel Bernard?
We did get confirmation that he did not get surgery. I mean, that was kind of evident by some of the workout videos and everything else like that there. But there was a concern right after the season whether he did require surgery. And he spoke with Jay Skursky of the Buffalo News the other day. I put up on my X timeline that he didn't have surgery, that he's been working out, really focused on injury prevention, try to get through the full season, just anything that he can do, 15, 20-minute warm-ups, just he's very mindful of that. And he had a pretty checkered injury history to begin with coming out of Baylor. So I'm glad that he's really taking care of his body, because I think he realizes what he can mean and what it meant with him not being available last year. I don't think that there was anything he could have done at that point. We knew that he was putting everything he could into being ready for that Kansas City game, but I think being more proactive is the smart veteran approach.
I want to ask you about Von Miller, Micah Hyde, and the veteran additions to the roster on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a big shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so Von Miller, let's get into him. Obviously, we know coming off of the ACL tear, and last season didn't go well. So a couple of things here. It sounds like there was a setback at some point with Von Miller in his recovery. And then secondly, and I know that you really can't predict this, but should we feel a level of optimism going into this season now that he's further removed from this injury, or is that kind of get wiped out by the fact that this guy's 35 years old?
Well, to answer the first part, I know he did have a setback early in training camp. We did see some tape on his opposite leg, suggesting some type of muscle strain. And he was not practicing a lot early on, and that kind of just moved the timeline back just enough where he wasn't going to be ready for week 1, which is why he started continued on PUP versus starting the season on the active roster there. So that didn't help things, but he was still up against the gun based off of the timeline when he tore and then just trying to get back. I know he's a eternal optimist and he'd be ready week 1. We know that he's, full of it sometimes there. So as to go into the second part there, I know age is playing a part into that stuff. We know that the farther guys get removed, especially after that first season, they do tend to return to form. My personal opinion, and of course my professional opinion too, is I think he's going to regain some level of his prior level form. Is he going to get what he was 10 years ago when he was getting all pro honors? No. I mean, he hasn't had all pro honors in 4, 5, 6 years or whatever, but he's still been an elite player. I believe that when he did sign the contract, it was a good contract at the time, because he wasn't coming off an injury and whatnot. So I just find it hard to believe that a Hall of Fame player is going to just drop so far down that he can't regain any level of form. And we did see flashes of it at the end of the season. He was starting to get home. He didn't get any sacks, didn't really get a lot of, notable production, but we did see some of that stuff where he was starting to get the bend around the edge, start to get the explosion, crashing the pockets. So, like I said, we're not getting all pro with Von Miller anymore. That guy's probably gone, but we should get some level of Von Miller, what we saw better than last year, but a little bit less than what he had before 2022 injury happened there. So, I mean, frankly, a Hall of Fame guy, even at the tail end of his career, is going to be better than most of our UDFAs, most of our, rookie draft picks, most of the guys who come off the street. So I'm pretty optimistic about him, but if he does fall off a cliff, it's just going to be a sad story if that's the case.
Yeah. Well, at least he took some concessions on his contract, and hopefully you're correct in that we get something between really good Von that we saw for 11 games and kind of what we saw at the end of the season. That would be a big, big addition to this Bills defense. One last returning player, or I guess maybe returning player, is Micah Hyde. I feel like this is kind of drug out a little bit longer than I anticipated, and Brandon Beane's continuously asked about it, and he's maintaining that he's having dialogue with Micah Hyde. It's just that Micah Hyde hasn't quite made a decision on whether or not he's going to return. I'm a little surprised. Are you thinking that there's a chance Micah Hyde comes back? It sounds like if he's going to play football, it's in Buffalo if Buffalo is going to have him. But Micah Hyde, football more, or is this it?
It's a good question. I mean, we saw him really struggle, at the end of last season, just going out with the stingers, and it's just got to be a constant thing. He's missing games, trying to get things right, preventing those constant hits there. The pessimist in me wants to say he's done, and he might just want to wait to announce it. I mean, he has a softball game coming up here soon. He might be conflicted. I'm sure the heart wants to play. I mean, find any football player, I can imagine they'd want to play forever. I mean, we saw some guys do play probably a lot longer than they should. And some guys just don't have the means anymore, like the physical abilities. I'm sure the brains tell him, hey, you got your money, you got your accolades, let's, young family, everything else, let's cut it loose there. I feel like they're maybe just buying time until he can make the own personal announcement, whatnot there. If he does come back and play, he's had diffusion. If he probably has some type of stenosis in there, which is narrowing of the spinal column around the spinal cord, you got to question, okay, maybe you come in healthy. Is this going to same thing happen again? We get the stingers and they have to prematurely retire, halfway through the season. So I think he's done, but if he does come back, hey, great. He's a great leader.
Let's get into some of the new players the Bills brought in, veteran additions. I'd like to start with Lyall Collins, who offensive lineman, can play right tackle, can play some guard, was off to a really good start to his career in Dallas, had some injuries in Dallas, winds up going to Cincinnati, has some injuries in Cincinnati, and now he's in Buffalo, wrong side of 30, and really the last 2-3 years have just been a lot of injuries. How optimistic are you with Lyall Collins being able to at least be available to help this team?
I'm 50-50 at best. I mean, I'm scrolling through the article I put up on my site, bangedupbills.com, and I mean, he plays offensive line. They're going to get rolled up on. They're going to get beat up. I mean, they're in for every snap. So, I mean, they play through a lot of stuff, but a lot of ankle injuries, back injuries, groin, knee sprains. He had hip injury with requiring surgery, missed the entire season in 2020. Let's see. And then he had the left ACL, MCL, PCL tear, playing against the New England Patriots in Week 16 during 2022 season. He pretty much missed the entire season the next year, and he did sign with the Cowboys late in season practice squad. If he does come back, I think he's going to be a shell of what he once was. If he can move inside, that might help prolong his career. If he does play tackle, maybe he plays some right tackle, keep that left knee inside. It might just come back to, can he pass physical? Yes, he has, but what does he have left in the tank? But I don't blame them for kicking the tires on him and bringing him in. They were definitely interested at the end of last year. It's just how good is he, a year, almost 2 years now removed from the injury. It just might come down to what he can do on the field. So I think good signing from a veteran standpoint. Just I don't know what he has left in the tank.
Speaking of guys that had an injury and it kind of tanked their career, I feel like that's been the case with Dion Jones. The Bills just signed him at linebacker in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. That's when he started to have some shoulder issues in Atlanta, gets traded to Cleveland, and shoulder issues become even more problematic. And this guy from 2016 to 2020 was one of the best linebackers in the game, and then it fell off quick, and it feels like that correlates with the shoulder injury. What can you tell us about Dion Jones?
So I just did his injury analysis, posted this morning, and we're talking on Friday here. He had left shoulder procedure. I figured that out because he was wearing a brace in one of the pictures during training camp. He had it in May of 2022, was projected to miss most of the offseason, came back in late training camp, played against the Jacksonville Jaguars in that preseason game. Must have aggravated something in there, and then they put him on injury reserve to begin the season. They got traded to Cleveland, and he just never really kind of got back up to it. Even last season, I know his snaps were down a whole lot compared to what he's used to, even when it was with Carolina last year. But I don't have a lot of details on the exact nature of the shoulder. I can tell you it's probably not a labrum or a rotator cuff based on the initial timeline he was given. They described it as a clean out or cleanup shoulder procedure, but whether that was just they shaved down the acromion and, clean up everything around the rotator cuff, or they had to do a clavicle resection and, due to osteoarthritis in the shoulder. Obviously, if that is happening and he's still having shoulder problems afterwards, he's going to have difficulty blocking. He's going to have trouble tackling to that side. He's just not going to be able to break free of his the blocks and try to get home and wrap guys up as much there. The actual tackling issue isn't the big thing. It's the everything else getting to the tackle. So I don't know how bad the shoulder is. Once again, obviously he passed a physical, but we've seen guys pass physicals that probably have no business playing, but they're getting paid millions of dollars. So it might just come down to what does he have left in the tank, like we said with Lyall Collins. And I like the idea. I mean, he was a great player, but hopefully the shoulder is not so bad that he can't get out there and get through another season.
The most significant contract that the Bills handed out to an outside free agent was Curtis Samuel this offseason. And so an important piece of this offense moving forward with the speed dynamic that he brings. What can you tell us about Curtis Samuel's injury history and kind of how you project him going forward?
Joe, how much time do we have on this? Because I'm going to need more.
Well, you don't have to give us. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I know you're concerned here.
Yeah. After he got signed, after I looked into this, I was texting you back and forth, and I wasn't a fan of the signing. I know guys come in with injuries. I know guys come in with no one's going to come through their career without injuries. I mean, the only guys maybe are kickers, punters, long snappers, maybe, but this guy's on the injury report all the time. He's dinged up and just so much of those things, a lot of soft tissue stuff. And I know he's had great production despite subpar quarterback play and playing through all these injuries. And, my comp for him was Jamison Crowder. And Jamison Crowder is a good player, but he couldn't stay on the field, whether it's, soft tissue stuff or whether it's broken bones. Just seemed like those guys are just banged up. And you wonder if you can stay healthy, what kind of receiver can you be? And he just is always working through something. I'm hoping that he gets into the facility. He's not having to be the number one guy, or at least they can give snaps to other guys like Dalton Kincaid or Khalil Shakir, that he can maybe stay focused more on health, especially as he's getting older, and then be more available instead of always working through something. Because, I mean, if you're always working through something, you're never going to be solely focused on the task at hand. I wasn't a fan of it just because of the money you give them. It's like that's what got us in trouble during the drought years. You pay big contracts out to guys who have injury histories or weren't proven. And then you're sitting there eating all this money and the guy's not available to you because, for different reasons there. So I want him to prove me wrong. I really want him to succeed. I mean, I don't think there's any content creator that doesn't want these guys to succeed, but I just wasn't optimistic about all the stuff he's to deal with there. So maybe he gets in the facility, focus more on veteran rest, and he can actually be more productive with a more steady quarterback.
Well, I thought that was one of the biggest problems with the Bills last year was a lot of their top contracts were injured, whether it was Tre'Davious White or it was Matt MIlano or Deion Jones or Von Miller, or, even felt like Micah Hyde was battling through some things. These are your highest paid players and they're not available to you. And, to quote Bill Belichick, your best ability is your availability, because if you're not available, you can't help the team. No, I think it's a well-found concern that you have, and something that I'm certainly mindful of. And the Bills need these contracts to perform. And if you're not on the field, you can't help the team. And then that's just the same as dead cap space, where it's not helping your football team. All right, I want to ask you about the draft class. Of course, Keon Coleman, the top pick, and some of the others as well, and a little KJ Hamler discussion as well coming up here on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards, and the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, including unique stickers you can trade with your friends, to complete albums for big prizes, cool new places and playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. The last new addition that I wanted to ask you about before we get into the draft class is KJ Hamler. And this is, I think, somewhat of a forgotten move that the Bills made, a future signing back in January. But a guy that was a top 50 pick a couple of years ago, a lot of speed at the wide receiver position, but injuries have really gotten in the way from him realizing his potential in the NFL. Catch us up on KJ Hamler.
He's a medical mess. That's unfortunately the best way to
describe it. A medical mess. Oh, boy. Boy. That's the first time you've said that. We've had a lot of injury conversations.
Yes, we have. Yeah, he's up there with some of the ones we've had long discussions about. High school, 2016 left ACL tear, missed a lot of his beginning of his college career at Penn State. And then he's had some hamstring stuff, that went over from season to season, concussion, more hamstring stuff. And then in 2021, he tore his left ACL again, along with a left hip dislocation, and he missed the rest of the season. And I went back and looked at the play because that was something that you could find. It's not always available due to just trying to find it in game film, but it was the way he landed. He landed with his leg fully up in the air, or not fully up in the air. He landed with his leg straight and his body kind of tilted or fell over it there. So all the stress coming up from the ground when his foot hit the ground tore the ACL, and then that force continued up and actually dislocated the hip because the rest of his body kind of kept fallen over and that popped the hip out of place. So it was a pretty significant injury. And the hip dislocations we don't see often. I mean, I'm thinking, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Tua Tagovailoa. There's a few other guys that do have that. I think the running back from Detroit recently. So the guys can come back from that stuff, but it's just not as easy. And then even 2022, he just battled through the left knee injuries. He was trying to come back. And then last year he had a torn pectoral and then pericarditis, and he was waived on the non-football injury list. And pericarditis is different from the myocarditis that we saw Tommy Sweeney deal with several years ago. But that can happen when you're just doing too much working out and kind of just irritating the heart, the sac surrounding the heart muscle there. So the best way to describe KJ Hamler is like a lottery ticket. I mean, if he can be healthy and get out there, I mean, I like him. I'm a Penn State fan. I want him to succeed, but he has not been able to stay healthy. And I think some of it's been circumstantial, but he has a lot of things going against him. But we see the Bills take flyers on guys saying, hey, you're first round, second round pick. Let's see what you got left. And if they don't have anything left, then they know they exhausted those options.
Yikes on that one. All right. The Bills' top pick in the 2024 NFL draft is wide receiver Keon Coleman. I don't really know of much in the way of injury there, but because this was their top pick, I'm curious if there's anything we need to know about.
Not much. He had a hip flexor muscle tear through the 2022 season at Michigan State. He battled through that, and then it didn't look like he required surgery because he took some time off and then went and started playing basketball, and that's been pretty well documented that he played basketball at Michigan State under Tom Izzo. And then last year he had a undisclosed injury against Wake Forest. I don't know what happened. I look at Dane Brugler's stuff. He is pretty comprehensive, but he didn't even have anything on that. So he's been pretty clean. The Bills are traditionally conservative with their injuries. They don't pick a lot of guys with soft tissue stuff. This deviated a little bit from there, but he only missed one game over 3 seasons, which is still pretty impressive and does fit more in that line with they want healthy guys coming out of the draft so that they can hit the ground running instead of trying to work through things or have setbacks there. So I was told that the Bills medical staff was really focused on serving conservative injuries just so the cap was so tight this year. They want to make sure that they're not going to have guys coming in and miss time immediately, even after being a high draft pick.
All right. So I would say looking through the Bills draft picks, they feel like collectively a group that's been healthy throughout their college careers. I would say that there's a couple guys that maybe don't fit that, and that's what I want to focus in on the rest of the way. Let's start with Ray Davis, the running back out of Kentucky and, of course, Temple and Vanderbilt. Feels like he's had some stuff. What do we need to know about that?
The only really big one was the right toe ligament tear back in 2021 when he played for Vanderbilt because he bounced around from Temple and Vanderbilt to Kentucky. He did have to get the surgery, and looking up the research, all of that, it appeared that though he had the plantar plate tear, the same injury that we saw Deontay Hardy have. The difference between those two is that when Ray Davis came back after this injury, he rushed for 1,000 yards the next 2 seasons after this injury, which was fantastic. Versus Deontay Hardy, he suffered that injury back in 2022 with the Saints and never really kind of got back up to speed. And there was that concern that a lot of guys that first season coming back after that surgery never really regained that form. Like only about a quarter of the guys get their pre-injury form with after years. So Davis is far enough removed from the injury that we're not too worried about it, but it was impressive that he came off of that and was rushing for 1,000 yards in back-to-back years there.
Yeah, we've seen some other guys take a little time to come back from certain stuff. The last guy is definitely a guy that has injuries, Edefuan Eluofoshio. I hope you practice the pronunciation of that, Dr. Kyle Trimble. I know he's got some stuff, bicep, ACL tear. What do we need to know about Eluofoshio?
Well, listen to the podcast every day like everybody else here. I have been paying attention to how you pronounce it, and I've been getting better with it. So thank you, Joe. Anyway, he had the left partial biceps tear in Washington. I don't know how he injured it, but he was probably trying to wrap somebody up, and it partially tore, and they need to do surgery. You can have bicep tears up toward the shoulder and play through them, but when it's down toward the elbow, it's almost impossible to play through them, and you need surgery. I have zero concerns about that. He did have the ACL tear several months later during offseason drills in the wintertime. I'm not sure which side he tore, but this was also in 2022, and he missed about half the season as he was coming back. So he came back in probably 9-10 months and was playing. The nice thing about this is he'll be almost 2 years removed from actually he's over 2 years removed from the actual injury at this point. So he had a pretty good senior season. I'm really not too concerned about it because he's outside that 2-year time window we see for concerns for re-tearing. We have seen guys who have torn in the past and then tear again because sometimes direct contact or sometimes unfortunate circumstances, but I'm not too concerned about him. But if he does deal with some injuries, hopefully it's going to be lesser nature and he just kind of battles through that. But he's going to be a special teams guy early on. So dealing with some hamstring, dealing with some contusions, stuff like that, it's not going to be surprising or all that concerning.
Dr. Kyle Trimble, banged up Bills, getting us caught up on the health of the Bills. Let's hope there's not a whole lot to talk about between now and week 1. That would be fantastic. I'm sure there's always going to be those things along the way that come up. There's all the OTAs are coming forward. And of course you get to camp and you really start to find out designations with guys. So inevitably there's going to be more to talk about, but let's hope no jet ski problems. I always remember the Kiko Alonso waking up one day in the middle of July, finding out your star middle linebacker is not going to be available for the season. So, we'll certainly talk of before week 1, but hopefully there's not a whole lot to get to. Here's to staying healthy the rest of the way. Dr. Kyle Trimble, thanks for giving us some of your time.
Joe, as always, thanks for having me on, and go Bills.
All right, folks, thank you so much for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.